So the first time I actually got a raise at a job was back in 2022. I was making around $13.75 an hour, and then I got a raise up to like $14.25 an hour. And I honestly thought it was, pretty nice. I got a raise. I'm finally making more money in my life. But it turns out that that raise was actually a pay cut, and I'm going to explain why in a little bit. But first, I just want to discuss the fact that I was making $14 an hour as a college graduate. In 2022, in May, I graduated from college, and I wasn't able to find any jobs in my field. I wasn't able to find any jobs that were paying anything remotely close to what I wanted to. And it got to the point where I was so desperate that I actually just had to get whatever job I could. So I wound up working at a car wash that my friend worked at. He ended up helping me get the job, and I got hired on at $13.75 an hour, which looking back is pretty painful 4 years later. But once I got that raise to $14.25, I felt pretty good. It was a 50-cent raise. If I worked 40 hours, I was going to be 50 cents times 40, which is another 20 bucks. That's another Chick-fil-A run. That's another Wendy's run. At the time I was vaping, that could have been another vape. So, all in all, it felt pretty good. But years later, I figured out that getting a raise like that is essentially meaningless. Because if you guys remember back in 2022, that was when inflation was spiking like crazy. I think that year it went up like 7 or 8%. I don't know the exact numbers, but just know it was incredibly high at that time. It was to the point where basically everyone at the car wash would come up and ask us why our prices raised. And I remember over the course of that summer, I think we raised our prices like 3 times. When I got there, a base wash was $6. It went up to $8 and then $10. And I think now it's at $12. So it's literally doubled in price over the course of these last few years. But those customers kept coming in saying, "Oh my God, the prices are insane. The inflation is insane." And it really made me wonder. And I pondered on this for a very long time. How come I'm only getting paid 50 cents more per hour if we're charging 20, 30, 40, 50, 100% more for the car washes that we're selling? I mean, really just think about that for a second. The car wash, when I got hired, was charging $6 per wash. By the end of the summer, it was $10. And years later, now it's at $12. So how come I wasn't getting paid more? Where is this extra money going to? It's not going to chemicals. It's not going to the equipment because that stuff didn't raise that much. So where did it go? Here's what it boils down to. Everyone thinks that jobs are essentially a safe choice. They're risk-free, and the only people that actually take on risk are the business owners. But in actual reality, the people that hold wages are the ones taking on the biggest risk, and here's why. Since around 2000, what a typical worker takes home barely moves if you adjust it for inflation. And during that same period, productivity has skyrocketed. Every single business that's survived from then until now is producing way more, way quicker, way more efficiently. Yet for some seemingly unknown reason, the pay proportionality just doesn't add up. The amount of money that we're getting paid for our jobs doesn't seem to align with how much more money these companies are making. And like for my own example, the company was making like 20, 30, 40% more as they raised these prices on their washes. And at the same time, I was only getting a raise of a few percent. So basically what it exposed to me was that the people that own the company have all of the control and the employees have basically no control whatsoever. And that is an enormous risk. Because here's the thing, the way people frame it is that, oh, if you just get a job and you work hard and you put your head down, you'll be safe, you'll be able to provide for yourself and pay your bills. But what they don't tell you is that slowly over time, if you're not getting enormous raises, you're actually getting a pay cut. Because as the economy expands, as the economy changes, inflation goes up and down. During times that inflation goes up, like in 2022 when it jumps up 7%, the amount of money that you make is proportionately less. The amount of money that you have is worth 7% less than what it was before because things are now 7% more expensive. I'm not sure if that's exactly how the math works out, but you understand what I'm saying. The purchasing power that you have from that money is considerably lower. And at the time I thought that if I just worked harder, if I just, grinded more, that it'd all work out for me. I wanted to be a great employee. I wanted to sell as many car wash packages as I could. I wanted to make sure the tunnel was spotless. I wanted to make sure that, the manager saw that so that I could end up making more money. Not because I enjoyed the job or anything like that at all, but because I just wanted to make more money. And at the end of the day, in capitalism, in this society, in order to make money, you basically have to either own something or produce something. And when you're working for somebody else, you have to produce. So I tried to produce the best that I could. But what it ended up resulting in was barely anything in return. But what it all boils down to is the major difference between ownership and being an employee. Those that own things can control everything. The owner of the company that you work at can literally control how much money goes into your bank account directly. They control whether or not your wage goes up or down. Not necessarily down. Most of the time, companies aren't going to just lower your wage per se, but by giving you a raise that's lower than inflation or not giving you a raise at all, it is effectively a pay cut. So what that means is if you're currently working a job right now, this second, if you have to clock in tomorrow or today or yesterday or any day within the next like whatever time period, and you don't get a raise, you're going to be losing money. And right now we're starting to see the exact same trend from 2022 ramp up again. You know, history repeats itself quite a bit, and right now we're heading into a pretty weird time period. It seems like prices are going all over the place. I remember like less than a year ago, or maybe slightly more than a year ago, it's kind of hard to keep track at this point, egg prices skyrocketed. They were like $8 a carton at one point. Now they're back down to like $1 or $2, and that's reasonable, but some of the other prices of different items continue to randomly rise and fall. Like, as we all know, this current war going on in Iran, it's just going to destroy supply chains. The oil market is in flux. Gas prices shot up to damn near $4 a gallon where I'm at, which is just insane. And so what that means is if you're not getting a raise of considerable margin right now, you're going to be falling behind. But no companies are going to be able to do this. They're going to argue and say, well, we can't actually raise your wage because we're strapped for cash. But what they'll turn around and do is raise the prices of what they're selling. You see, owners control everything. They control how much they pay you, and then they control how much they charge for their products. If they want more margin, they can just increase their prices, and they can do it incrementally, just like the job I was at. They didn't go straight from $6 to $10. They incrementally changed it. $1 here, $1 there. But by the end of the summer, it was up $4. Now just think about that. It's the same car wash, and inflation only went up 7%, but they raised their prices way more than 7%. It's something called greedflation, which is essentially the idea that companies are going to use inflation as a means to be as greedy as possible, which is obviously not unexpected whatsoever. That's completely expected. But basically, the company will see that inflation is happening and then use it as a justification to not give raises and then also raise the prices of their products. One major example of this is Frito-Lay. If you guys don't know, Frito-Lay was jacking up, of course you guys know, I don't even need to say that. Frito-Lay was jacking up their prices just insanely fast. It got to the point where a bag of chips was almost $7, when in 2022 it was like $3.70. So they basically doubled in price over the course of a couple of years. No matter what the inflation rate was, it was nowhere near the point where you needed to raise your prices that much, but they did it anyway. And at the same time, they were downsizing their workforce. They fired a lot of people, factories ended up having to close and things like that. So it doesn't actually make any sense. So where did all that extra profit go to? Well, one thing's for sure, the CEO of PepsiCo made like $28 million or something ridiculous like that. So there's a good chunk right there. And the math on it, it's like 390 times more than the average PepsiCo worker got. So he's making what like 300 something people would have gotten if he just didn't exist. So essentially, they were just making record profits year after year, and their employees weren't getting any of the benefit from that. Only the executives were. So basically, in this situation, everybody got screwed but the owners, and that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make here. The only people that succeed in any sort of economic turmoil are people that own things. So here's the thing that we can actually do about this, because it's not just doom and gloom. It's not just over for us. What we have to do is figure out a way to create some sort of ownership. Now, luckily in this day and age, it's actually pretty easy to have some sort of ownership. So if you have access to the internet or a smartphone, you actually have access to own things that you never would have in the past. If you were born 100 years ago in 1926, by the time you were like 20 years old, you'd be like in the middle of fucking World War II, right? Or just after it. So it'd be very difficult for you to own anything. You'd essentially be relegated to working a regular job forever. You'd clock in, get your pay, and you'd have a pretty solid life overall. You'd be able to afford a house, you'd be able to buy a car, you'd be able to get married, have children, and live pretty comfortably. Especially if your dad served in the war or something like that and you guys were living off the GI Bill. Things were just set up for you to have a normal, comfortable life. But at the same time, there was no way for you to really own anything. The people that own things were owning them before that time period. During the 1950s, there was a super high corporate tax rate. So corporations weren't just going crazy making stupid amounts of profit like they are now. And it's no real coincidence why the living standards back then were seemingly higher and people were able to actually have a fulfilling life back then without being rich. But nowadays, it's basically the opposite. Ownership owns everything, and they control everything as well now. They're so embedded within the government and the entire economy that we have no choice but to basically bend to their will. But on the bright side, ownership is, as I said, some ways easier than what it used to be. If you're talking about like a physical business, it's going to be pretty difficult. Of course, there's always going to be some physical aspects you can still go down if you have a great idea for a new type of chemical or something like that. If you're a physicist or a chemist, or maybe you sell some type of advanced sneakers technology or something like this. Of course, there's still paths ahead, but it's much more difficult than what it was back then. Like back then, you could have just struck oil and literally got rich doing that. Nowadays, that doesn't exist. But what we do have is the internet, which gives us the ability to make digital websites or digital products for very cheap. And the way that I ended up making over $350K off of the internet was basically through YouTube, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm not going to get into it too deep, but essentially I was able to figure out a way to generate tons of views and get tons of ad revenue into my pockets. And it's all because I own the channel. Now, of course, there were some freelancers and contractors used to edit these videos and things like that I paid. But since I was the owner, I was able to control how much I pay them. And here's the best part about this model. So as prices go up, as inflation goes up, as the economy gets weaker in some aspects, advertisers are going to be forced to pay YouTube more money for those ads that they were serving before. They're not just going to take the same deal. So what that means is as the prices go up, as inflation goes up, my ad revenue is also going to go up by default, which is incredibly powerful. And this can be the case for any business that you end up owning. It could be Shopify, it could be Amazon, whatever it is, you can just slightly increase your prices as you wish. And then if you have any employees, you don't have to pay them anymore. Now, unfortunately, this sort of punishes people who are still unaware of this cycle, but at the end of the day, that's sort of what capitalism is. And if you're watching this, you're likely a man in this society, so you totally understand where I'm coming from. It's not that you want to exploit people and take their labor for less than what it could be paid, but it's the fact that you have to do what you have to do to survive. Like, I don't want to be broke, I don't want to be poor, so I have to outsource my work to other people, and unfortunately, I'm not going to pay them the maximum amount I could, because first of all, I don't have to, and second of all, I want to, of course, make my own life better. And in some ways, it is tough, psychologically speaking, to deal with that, because it's like, well, shit, I'm doing what I despise other corporations are doing. But at the same time, it's not morally reprehensible. It's not like I'm going out there and killing people. I'm not stealing from people. I'm not doing any sort of Epstein level behavior. And that's something that you guys need to really realize. In this current period of time, no matter what you're doing, there's almost no way in hell it's anywhere near the level of these guys at the top of our society. So you owning a little business and having some employees and then you make some profit, or being a landlord and making money off of it, you shouldn't feel terrible about it. And that doesn't mean be a piece of shit and just rip off your employees and pay them nothing and never give them a raise. That doesn't mean that at all, and abuse them or anything like that. It just means that you can control how much money you end up paying people. And along those same lines, it also applies to having an investment portfolio full of stocks or real estate, whatever it is, because, as inflation goes up, as prices go up, so too does the stock market. A lot of people think that there's like a negative correlation there. Not really. As inflation goes up, the amount of money in the economy goes up, dollar bills go up. So the total amount of capital in existence is increased by a lot. And so that money eventually funnels its way back into the stock market. The S&P 500 and things like that will also raise, pretty well alongside inflation. You can look back at history throughout time, the past 100 years plus of the S&P 500, and see that trend playing out repeatedly. It always goes up. And no matter what inflation does, eventually it will trickle back into the stock market. And of course, the housing market and things like that as well. Over time, there are ups and downs along the way, but over the course of time, throughout 10 to 20 years, that is actually what pans out. And then if you own something, you can take the profit that you get from that and stick it into the stock market, which is what I've done, which is why I have a portfolio right now that's continuing to grow. And right now in that portfolio, I have more money than I would make at a regular job, the job that I used to have at the car wash for sure. Almost double that amount just in the stock portfolio, not including my high yield savings account or my regular bank account or anything else. So if there's one thing that you guys kind of take away from this video, it's this. Try to think of a way that you can create some sort of ownership for yourself. Because if you continue to only get a wage from someone else, you're eventually going to start losing money. You're going to start making less money because inflation is going to keep going up faster than your raises are. So your purchasing power is going to go down. And that basically just means you're getting poorer and poorer every single day. And it took me years to figure this out. So hopefully this can kind of unlock something in your head if you're still young and you're still trying to figure things out. Now is a great time to at least start to understand this. Even if you can't act on it right now, just have that in your head. The people that own everything, literally. They own you in some respect because you are forced to give them your time. They own the products or services that they're selling as well, and the prices alongside of those. And the only thing that can control the owners are the customers, and the customers are going to continue to come back, especially for these products like Lay's and these big companies. In general, there are millions of Americans working for these large corporations that are worth billions of dollars. So people are going to continue to go to these businesses even if the prices are raised. So the executives are never actually going to feel the pain that you feel. Their bonuses are going to be massive. They're going to be making $20, $30, $40 million, some of them making billions of dollars a year at the top end. And meanwhile, you're making 3 to 4% raise, if that, every single year. And it's really important because as time goes on, this window that we're currently living in is starting to close. It's closing very fast, to be honest with you. With the advent of AI, pretty much everything is becoming harder to do. We're still in this era and age where we can make money online and create some separation for ourselves and actually kind of get some breathing room in our lives. But as AI continues to expand, people with resources and capital are just going to be able to spread their fingers and their tentacles out wide and sort of capture all of these little pockets that we're taking advantage of right now. So it's very important that you guys get on it as soon as you can. The second you get off this video, you need to think about what it means to own something and think about what it is that you can create or capture that you can own. Even if it ends up just being your parents' house in 40 years when they pass away or something like that, just anything at all that will give you some sort of financial leverage in your life. Without that, you're going to be at the whims of whatever the ownership class wants to pay you. So it's basically kill or be killed, sink or swim. Either you own or you're owned. And that's it for this video. See you later.